Beyond the Headlines. I'm Stephenson, Worme, your presenter, and as usual, it's always nice to have you on board with us on Beyond the Headlines. I've got a wonderful team this evening, and let me quickly introduce you to them. May I say before doing that, this is an abbreviated version tonight because there was a program ahead of us. So we'll try to see how much we can get through in just over an hour. We've got about an hour and 5 minutes on the program. Well, to my immediate left is Dr. Curtis Jacob, who of course is a historian and educator. And early on, I wanted to give him more accolades, and he told me, no, I should just use Dr. Curtis Jacob. That's the definition of modesty. Just to his left, we've got Mr. Joseph Antoine, who I've known for quite some time. So it's nice to have him also in our studio. And then a lovely lady here in Lillian Sylvester, Miss Lillian Sylvester, of course, who's a former director of library services here in Grenada, and somebody who I got to know as far back as 1983. So this is a lovely cast here. Good evening to you, gentlemen and lady.
Good evening to you, Pastor, and good evening to listeners and the viewers.
Well, you know, I was thinking, Miss Sylvester, that there are so many treasured memories, particularly for the couple of years I spent at the National Library. I'll tell you one. When I got in there as a young member of staff, I remember that you said to me that I needed to type the pockets on the book, and it didn't go down too very well with me because I just felt that this was a female thing, and I'd never done anything on the computer, on the typewriter before, and you insisted, hey, if you're going to work in the library, then you've got to learn to type. And I want to say no, thanks a lot, because that sort of triggered off my my development of typing skills, in so much that the books that I wrote, I did all the typing, basically all the typing myself. So I want to say thank you, and I'm saying it publicly here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Pastor.
And Mr. Antoine,
good student.
Thank you.
What you left out piece, though, what you didn't say was that I held your fingers and I said,
It's amazing you remember all of that.
And I put it on the keys, A-S-D-F.
That was something else. And the gentleman, of course, to Miss Sylvester's right, who I've known since 1984, I think, and actually through library, we got to know each other, and we've been friends over the years. And of course, Dr. Jacob, who I know not as long as you two folk, but long enough for us to be conversant. So, okay, so let's look and tell me a little bit, team, as to library services and how important is library services. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Sylvester.
Well, I think we should begin actually with a definition of what a library is. I remember growing up, the Student's Companion said a library was a place where books are kept. And between that time and the time I started to work in a library, I realized the library referred to the collection as well as the space, as well as the physical space. And then UNESCO went on to define a library as a collection of organized, published and unpublished material with the services of the person or the qualified personnel who would collect and manage, etc., for educational, recreational, and informational purposes. Mm-hmm. So basically, that is the definition that we're working with as to what a library is. And of course, there are different kinds of libraries because they cater for the needs of different people.
That's correct.
And before we go a little further, I would like to clear the air because some people speak of National Public Library, or some people say the National Library in town. Grenada does not have a national library, and we'll get to that.
Yes, so, but just chime in regards to the importance of library services. So I would like all three of you to just give me in synopsis how important is the service.
You mean that, but I think it's extremely important. In fact, especially for the people who don't have the means to keep on buying books. And my own experience, maybe which is one of the things that can give me the confidence to be here, is that I was able to use the library. And I think very often that I haven't used much of the resources of the state as other people, but there's a few things that I cannot deny I have not benefited from it, like elementary school and the public library. Taxpayers' money went into that. And it is extremely important that people have a possibility of reading even when they can't afford. In fact, I was also thinking about my first experience with Africa. Somewhere after 1975, when the government established relations with Nigeria, and we used to have newspaper, I don't know if Lillian remember that, coming from Nigeria. And I remember being thrilled with some of the stories in the papers, in the Nigerian papers. I don't remember the name of the papers now. But I mean, even the formation of Friends of the Earth can be traced back to my experience in the library, from reading the London Times and the New Statesman and Spectator and the Guardian. I read about the work of Friends of the Earth. So come 1990, 91, when I saw the need to have some kind of organization, I remember Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, and then settled to try to form a Friends of the Earth group. And then also, lastly, through reading the American scientists, the scientific magazine, I was able to make a friend, Dr. Sahid Durrani, who wrote on another Pakistani scientist. They were dealing with moon samples, testing moon samples and so on. He worked at the University of Birmingham. And then I was able to write based on an article he wrote. I wrote him, and we became friends so much that in 1992, when I went to London, he invited me to come to Birmingham to spend a few days with his family. Mm-hmm. I'm saying the library had so much possibilities.
Okay.
I mean, if it wasn't the library, I would not have that kind of experience. I just want to make those kind of,
Yes. Dr. Jacob?
Yes, well, I suppose most of you would know that anyway, but I would point out that the reason why you don't know me as long as you know the other two is because I am not Grenadian. I was born and grew up in Trinidad.
And you went to Carnage?
Yes, I went to Carnage Boys Government, which is my first experience with a library. Yes, and the first time I saw something that was a library was the Trinidad Public Library, and they had a van full of literally a traveling library, which would bring books at appointed times during the term or sometime, and we borrow the books and read them and then bring them back and so on. Libraries, well, as I got to be what you might call an academic, you begin to understand the importance of libraries. Okay, we discovered then that perhaps the first library, as we understand the term today, in the Caribbean was established sometime between 1492 and 1555. That library still exists today. It's not in the Anglophone Caribbean. It's in fact in Dominican Republic. Yeah, the first library established in the archipelagic Caribbean was in fact in Dominican Republic. It was one of the first universities established by the Spaniards. Now, by 1636, it was more than nearly 100 years after Harvard appears, right? And the one in Santo Domingo was one of 4: Peru, Mexico City, and another one which I can't think. It wasn't Havana, by the way, but Havana came later. But one of the other things I remember too is that I remember one of my political science teachers saying, he said, "I will forgive Eric Williams every sin that he committed except one, and that is he did did not establish a library system in Trinidad. And I had to agree with him. Libraries determine one of the things which determine the development and the standard of living in any society is with libraries. And I heard a very well-known public figure said a few years ago, he was heard to say, I didn't hear him directly say it, is that you don't need a library, all you need is a tablet. And I said, but that person could not have possibly thought before saying that, you know. I mean, what is a tablet? A tablet has to be fed by something else, you know. And for us, not having a proper library is a measure of our development as a people and as a nation. And if we don't have one, well, okay? Yeah. You know, and it's about time we really started. I mean, I have a little experience, not the library so much, but with collections and so on as an academic. And a lot of that's how I got to know Lillian about 2 decades ago. You know, it was that I came searching. I have the distinction of being the person who wrote the first doctoral dissertation on Fidon's Rebellion. And because of that, you had to examine the sources which were published, non-published, and fiction and non-fiction, and you got to understand the importance of libraries and the importance of their being well kept. Mm-hmm. And one last little anecdote, 2008, I am in British University. Can't remember which one it is now, but one of the librarians, well, not a librarian, he said, we need to do something about the papers in Grenada. And I said, how do you know about the papers of Grenada? Because he was teaching history at Cavell campus. He said, the paper that you wrote, you know, and we talk about the condition of the papers and we need to do something. And out of that came a British Library grant for us to digitize some of the papers, probably from 1763 until 1830, which are now part of part of British Library's collection. They didn't. I was trying to beg them to digitize the PRG papers, and they didn't want to. but you know, that's the libraries is part of the measurement of any organized civil society. How do the people get public information? How do people inform themselves?
Yeah, well, we do have quite a history in Grenada in regards to library services, and a lot of people may not know, in fact, that it didn't just come on the scene maybe just 50, 60 years ago. Trinidad and Tobago's library services started in 1851. They're about Grenada's here.
Almost about the same time.
1853, we're told. It's interesting that St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they started in 1846, thereabout. Barbados, 1879, but there were activities of library, maybe not as formal. So within that 1840, 1850 period, we noticed that a number of Caribbean countries were establishing libraries already, so it didn't turn up just all of a sudden, and they've been around for quite a long time.
Actually, what happened in Grenada, there was a bill passed by the Legislative Council in 1846 to establish libraries and museums.
That's correct.
And in 1853, thereabout, a subscription library was established. But what happened was that there was a corporation called the Carnegie Corporation that was responsible for the development of libraries throughout the Caribbean. There was some sort of survey by an English librarian, Mr. Savage, and as a result of that, they decided to do something about libraries, and they established the corporation. And so things sort of moved along the same path for everybody afterwards.
Yeah, I think even in Trinidad, in San Fernando,
They still have the Carnegie. Yeah, they
That's
still have-
correct.
There's also Carnegie, the American steel magnate, who gave a lot of charity after and so on. And but you would notice, of course, that the libraries in the Caribbean have one thing in common. They were established after 1834, right? Which suggests strongly that it has something to do with emancipation and the evolution into a free and informed society.
That's correct.
It appears that way from the time.
In fact, you mentioned San Fernando Library. I was fortunate to be a member of San Fernando Library when I went to school down there. And I went to St. Andrew's Theological College.
Oh, okay. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, fortunate. In fact, I've been to wherever I spend any significant time, I've always joined library, whether it's in San Fernando or in Saskatchewan, Canada. I've always felt it necessary
Of course, yes.
to be in libraries. And even here, I used to be in UV library, I used to be in the public library, there used to be the community school, there's a school library in Tantine, where the
That was the
commercial
school library center.
Yes, I was in almost wherever there was a library.
You were there.
So much that I end up establishing a mini library, which surprised some of them politicians who come around canvassing and look in my house and say, "But you have a library in there?" And was shocked. It's the first time I see that.
Really?
All right.
Yeah. So let me just speak a little bit about my love affair with libraries.
Hold on, but you were only about 18 when you got into library service. Am I right?
I was 17.
17, so I missed it by one.
Yeah, because I sort of left school and went into the public service, and I started at the public library as a library. But they call them library assistant at the time. They call them library clerks now. It was a acting library assistant, and in those days. Well, as a matter of fact, it still happens now, except that we get so technological now, but everything was manual. And I've learned that libraries at the time, basically the function of libraries was twofold. One, to collect and disseminate information, and two, to aid in the socialization process. So all the persons who have passed through the library system, I shouldn't say all the persons who have passed, all the persons who have made it through in Grenada successfully have passed through the library system because they have seen the need for them to read or for them to do some form of research or something. So as to add with what Dr. Jacob said, library services are integral for the development of any country because it provides much needed information for almost everybody at every level, right? For students, for pastors and preachers in churches, for politicians, for policy makers and planners, for housewives, for people just want to pass the time away and all of that. And as Mr. Antoine said, it's not everybody who was exposed to funds to buy a book or to just go to the bookstore and get what they want. The government has a responsibility to aid in that process through the establishment and development of libraries, whether community or public. But there are different kinds of libraries you will appreciate, right?
Right.
The type of library depends on either A, who set the library up, or who the library caters for. So for example, there are public libraries, and the public library is an entity that caters for rank and file, right? It's usually mandated by government and managed through public funds. And then there are school libraries / academic libraries. So school libraries that cater to support the school's curriculum. There are national libraries which are different to public libraries.
Of course.
National libraries are mandated to preserve the heritage of the country, unlike public library that would deal with just about every piece of literature. And then there are specialized libraries or special libraries. So for example, if GBN has a library here. It's a special library because it's basically not necessarily open to the public,
right,
but for the staff of GBN. And as we utilize the services of these libraries, I suppose it helps us in our different sphere of life, you know. So the library you use is dependent on the information you want.
You need, okay.
Or need.
I got
But
that.
I have a couple of things I wanted to raise to you, Lillian. I have serious problems with people who talking about tablets and digitized libraries and all that. The time that man became organized and began to record and store information, it was mostly on paper.
And stone. And
Right? And stone, well, right, set in stone,
Yeah.
right? This business about digitization, so that is not even 100 years yet in the strict sense. And the technology changes, and what technology you had before remains obsolete, but paper remains. You can find paper which was printed or things were produced 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, right? The papyrus of Annie, for instance,
Scrolls,
right?
for example.
Yes, paper. Paper is still the best thing.
And if I should come in here, a few years ago I read it from a magazine called Und. In Norwegian, I think it means far away. It's a kind of radical author. It does all kind of publishing that you wouldn't find in the regular press. And I remember it featured a leading educator in the United States or Canada. And he was saying, look, we've been encouraged to do away with books. But he said that it would be a travesty, because he said what would happen? The rich will continue to pay to have the children have books, while the rest of us, wouldn't have no books, and they would have access to books, whereas the rest of the population would have no books.
Okay, so let's just go back a little bit, Ms. Sylvester, because I remember the days when you had the mobile library service.
Yeah.
How did that operate, and what benefit did it bring to the nation as a whole?
The mobile library service was established in 1961, and the idea of the mobile was to take library services to the districts, especially the schools. When it started, there were 23 service points, so there were schools and maybe 1 or 2 community centers that they went to. They took the stock of books there, people registered, there was a schedule as to when they came, and people got to this little bus and exchanged their books and that kind of thing. I did not have much to do with the bookmobile when I started working, but when I was a child, I remember I went to Samaritan School, and that was my first experience with the bookmobile there. But the stock was so limited that before you turn, I read all these books, and the teacher would say, Lillian, let other children read the books. You are books home, that kind of thing. At some point, it was administered through the school's library center. The school's library center was an entity that began about 1975, and it was situated somewhere down in Trantine.
Yes.
So they handled the school and the school part of library services and the bookmobile. And much later, when I became director of library services, when I became librarian, one of them, we had responsibility for the bookmobile, because by that time the school's library center seemed to have become defunct. But a lot of students who are adults today and in big jobs remember the bookmobile going to their schools or community centers. That was succeeded by something called a book drop, because by then we didn't have a bookmobile, but we would drop a certain amount of books at the schools. And it was an experiment with about 4 or 5 schools. So you drop a quantity of books there, and over about 5 periods, the last school that had the books, it belonged to them. And yeah, because if you circulate books after 5 schools, I mean, we're taking, and that seemed to work pretty well until I don't know what happened.
Just want to come in here and say one of the value of library or services is that it helps to discipline the individual, because especially you have to do in a public in a kind of open place like the public library where we have. You have to exercise silence. I mean, and I think this, unfortunately, this is missing in our society today. I mean, there's only noise, and then we complain that the kids after school goes and congregate at the bus, the terminal and other places, without realizing some of the possibility they had before have been cut out from them. In addition to the fact that they might have problems at home and do not want to go home easily. I mean, so we have to look at this thing holistically. I mean, the value of libraries is very, very valuable.
Okay. Just take us around, Dr. Jacob, I'm going to come to you shortly. Just take us around, Ms. Sylvester, in regards to the service at present, services that are being offered in terms of library services across the nation, whether it's schools or some other library entity in some other parish. What obtains right now?
Okay, well, before I say this, I must say that there are a couple community libraries that are operating at present. There's one in St. John's. I think that is a success story of library services right now. There's one in St. Mark. There's one in River Sally that serves the school and the community. It's on the school compound. There's one in St. David. There was one in Croshoe, and up to, I think, sometime last year or late the year before, there were some issues there and it had to be closed. There's one in Carriacou. These are the functional libraries right now. And they offer general library services. For example, they offer what is called, well, you can come in and browse and check in and check out books. They have some specialized services for people who are shut in or people who would require material but they're not on site. There is a service when school reopens. They go to the schools and do some basic library skills with the students. They introduce them to libraries, what libraries are about, how do you go researching, how you use an encyclopedia, etc. There are programs, there are reading programs, and there are summer programs. Summer programs are held during the period when school goes out in the summer. And we try to teach the students something related to the environment or otherwise, so that they can go home and practice whatever or take it to their parents and other siblings. There is what is called selective dissemination of information. It doesn't happen in all of them, but it happens in, for example, St. John. So, for example, if you are a scout, we will go through magazine and other material, and materials relating to your area we will allot you, or we will get it to you without you having to come and sit in there and go through trying to find something along that line,
But
so,
have they, these community libraries, have they been visited well enough? Or
yeah, they are. They were seriously affected by COVID, but now things are falling back into place. In fact, St. John, I'm trying to remember the figures, but they've been having a lot of visits by this, especially the students. So, for example, I remember hearing the vice president of the St. John's board calling out some figures as to the usage, and you have 200 visits now. A visit. You can have 200 visits and not necessarily by 200 persons, because remember, one person might come in more than once for the week.
Gotcha.
So, but you have 200 visits per month, 200 students and 200 adults and that kind of thing. That's encouraging at this time.
Okay. All right.
The figures have been slow,
but it's consistent, steady.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break because we've got quite a few other things that we need to talk about in regards to library services in Grenada. And we break now and we'll be right back.
Winner today with the NLA by simply purchasing your Daily Pick 3 and Playway tickets at your nearest agent or NLA outlet. As a proud sponsor of the CPL cricket coverage, the NLA continues to support the development of sports, culture, and nation building in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. The NLA, making your dreams a reality.
I'm a winner, you are winner, we are winners, winners.
Building or renovating your home or business? Why not use clean, renewable energy? Install solar panels to power your home and office and see your energy costs go down and your savings go up. Using renewable solar-powered energy protects our environment, reduces our carbon footprint, and slows the devastating impact of climate change. Republic Bank can help to finance construction and renovations that make use of renewable energy. Visit any Republic Bank branch and ask about renewable energy financing options today.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
When you need your prescription filled or you require non-prescribed medication, supplements, or all your personal needs, visit Gittins Healthcare at locations on Wall Street, Grand Anse, Victoria Street, Grenville, and Central Deputy Street, Wharf. Gittins Healthcare aims to provide an exceptional personalized pharmacy experience. Additionally, children under 5 and adults 55 years and over will enjoy 10% discount on purchases of $20 and over on prescription medication. Stop settling for less. Visit Gittins Healthcare, where your health is our priority.
And welcome back, of course, to Beyond the Headlines. We're talking library services pertinent, of course, to Grenada. And we've got Dr. Curtis Jacob here with us, and we've got Mr. Joseph Antoine and Miss Lillian Sylvester. Now, Dr. Jacob, the world is not the same as it was back in 1922 or 1895. It's changing, whether we like it or not, it's changing, right? So the dynamics of almost every subject matter are indeed changing. What do you think a modern library should look like? Certainly not like 1953. And I do know that you believe in paper. Trust me, I believe in paper too. I would never forsake my paper. What's your concept of a modern library? With specific reference to Grenada. I don't want us to go all over the place right here because we're dealing with library services.
Grenada has, first, I'm not talking about published books. Grenada is literally a gold mine for its documentary history, which remains, well, I'm not so sure if it has been a proper inventory has been made. Lillian might be able to bear me out on that. There is stuff I remember looking at another part, not necessarily in the library here. I found a 1782 surrender, so to speak, during the American Revolution, and the British Navy captured an American privateer. It was basically an American pirate. And sure enough, John Hancock, in the exact way that we see John Hancock's name is signed as the Secretary of the Treasury at the time. It is exactly like that. I was trying to get the Smithsonian involved to get some of them to do some of this stuff to preserve some of this stuff here, but no bites after about maybe nearly at least 5 years. But Grenada has a gold mine, literally, of stuff which we don't even know about, right? We have forgotten a lot of things. Now, that's a point I wanted to raise with you, Lillian. You remember there's a law which, I don't want to say compel, but requires newspapers to submit to the authorities or the libraries copies of their newspapers. Is there a law which...
There's a legal deposit.
Yes, legal deposit copy, yes.
Done in maybe 82 or sometime.
1982?
I think so.
So late?
I think there was something done in 82. What was there before? I am not sure. I can't really speak to it because I am not sure what was there.
Yes.
But I remember 1982 when Didicus Jules was permanent secretary of Ministry of Education. I remember there was some recommendation, and they ended up doing some legal deposit legislation that mandated publishers.
Yes,
to
yes.
5 copies, I think it was.
Yeah, there's a amount of copies you had to
so one
keep
went to
for
the library, one went to Government House, one went wherever one.
Yes, well, which
I don't think that's been followed up.
I remember doing research on Fidon's Rebellion, and I came across in the registry of the Supreme Court a box, literally a box, cardboard box, full of those newspapers which were published and circulated between 1973 and 1979, which Eric Gary's government banned from publication. But apparently what was seized were taken and put in a box or two, and that's about 20-something years ago, and I made a mental note to go and look for them afterwards. I haven't found them, but it would have been, very interesting reading to see what the New Jewel movement and them were doing at the time. But I suspect it is still there, but it's just that it's covered over in so many other stuff. Okay. But the government usually in organized governments, you are supposed to deposit with the authorities copies of all newspapers printed, and I think that has to do with education, general education of a society and so on, and dissemination of information. I remember in the Trinidad Public Library on Knox Street in Port of Spain, when I was in 6th form, there's a part of the outside, just on the edge of Knox Street, there is a board where the news of the day on the newspapers were pasted on, and people would come and read those things. So it is, libraries do all those kinds of things, and it's not just lending out books and so on and whatnot. That is it's a very serious,
right. So don't go away. I still want to hear your thoughts about a modern library. What should be some of the components?
No, a modern library, you must have people. You must have people. I'm coming to that. However, and that is what is already in existence in libraries that we know. Some of those the paper issues are so valuable that they do not want people to actually physically touch them anymore. So they make digital copies, or they make virtual copies, so to speak. And that new technology has to be part of what a new library looks like. I'm not a librarian by profession, but I have done so much research into libraries. When I went about 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I went to an optometrist or an optician to look at my. He says, you were supposed to have your eyes done about 10 or 15 years before, since you were over the age 40, you were supposed to be doing that, and I was still doing PhD then. And as it turned out, that's the time when you're reading those microfilm readers, and then suddenly the gears would shift, so the light would shift from light to dark, and you could feel your eyes adjusting, and that probably helped contribute to why having to wear spectacles now. But I suppose most people who read a lot in the end get spectacles because we tend to read a lot, but the point is that we need paper. Paper is, I think, I bought this thing some years ago, a hard drive, and you left it, you copy stuff, and then when you went to it, it can't open.
Right, but it wouldn't hurt to have both, of course.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
yes,
it would not
because with use of computers now, it is very extremely convenient to have digital copies which you can have on a jump drive and you can look. But the real thing, you see in the archives, you see stuff which was written sometime by Marish or those shops in the 1920s. They are kept in such a way that you cannot touch them, but there's nothing which could compare to the actual feel of it. There's so much other, There's a personal example. I am reading John Hay, and in hard copy. And John Hay is talking about Victor Hughes writing to Julian Fiddle and telling him, he say, man, frappe fort, exterminate his Anglais. And strike hard, or as we would say, heavy manners, right? Exterminate. And then you read that in John Hay's book. And then you go to France and you see the actual words that Victor Hughes wrote to Julian Fiddle. Of course, the documents that Julian Fiddle received, we don't have them. But we have the quote original unquote documents still in France.
Okay.
Right? But no. We need to have, we have to incorporate the modern contemporary methods of preservation and retrieval for us to go forward, but there's still nothing that could really substitute for reading the real thing.
I agree. Ms. Sylvester?
Well, we mix into
I'm going to come to you. Yeah.
Too, We're talking libraries on one hand and we're talking archives on the other.
Yes.
Yeah, we understand that.
Yes.
And we want to kind of make it specific to our country.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
that's why I was in.
What has happened here is that now government has not mandated a national archives. Okay? What has happened is that the then librarian Sheila Buckmeyer from about 1960 something decided to sort of extend the historical section of the public library, and by doing so, a number of items which are now archival. Now, in the strict sense of the word, materials are not archival before 50 years. So a lot of materials are either archival or they have potential archival value.
Yes.
And she collected them with the thought of developing what is called a national archives. Of course, you will speak and write and cry and talk and nobody bothers with you. So from that time to now, we still have not had a national archives, although we have those sort of material around, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you have those sort of material preserved, then people cannot come and have access to it for different reasons. So then I guess in this situation, digital copies would be necessary. So you make copies that people could access and use at will. But then your valuable original document is preserved and it stays there for provenance and, they won't just slip me, but it's there. posterity.
Yes, but on that point, Lillian, there's another matter which I think people gathered here should know. When Sir Daniel Williams gave to Sir Paul Schoon, yet those times, the mandate to take over this project for the National Archives. Yeah. National Archives used to meet at Marishaw House when I was working there. And these
probably the only two surviving members.
Who, you and I?
Of the committee?
I don't know if we are the only two.
If we include Sir Daniel Williams.
Yeah, and so Paul Schoon on the spot gave me the responsibility of drafting a National Archives Act.
I remember.
Right? Which I submitted to two succeeding governments of Grenada. And so when the first one was the 2008-2013 government, so I presented it to the head of that government. Yeah. Oh, yes, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then after the 2013 government came into office, I raised that matter again, and that particular head of government said, "Oh yes, I think very strongly about it, and so on, and should be done." And we are awaiting his pleasure. That's 2013. This is 2022. But that is there is a draft act which was written sometime in 2008 for National Archives. It is somewhere in some government, and if I look hard enough in my own papers, I might find even a digital copy, right? Okay. But that is it's a matter which has been in play for a long time.
Okay, so Mr. Antoine, your thoughts on a modern library or modern library services in Grenada? What's your thought?
Well, it should go with, along the line that is the best libraries we have in the world. I mean, within cost and so on. But I will agree with Dr. Jacob. The print part of it must be a basic element of it. Apart from the cloud and the digital stuff, we need those things. I mean, we could adopt those things, but it needs to be holistic. The problem with us is that we tend to throw away things that we don't seem to understand the value for. Mm-hmm. It's like how we throw away books after the invasion. Tons and tons of books were dumped outside of the fish markets area there, and at Perseverance. I mean, for God, I mean, it bleeds my heart every time I think about it. And and I think also, one of the things we can do is to ask every Grenadian, from Church, wherever we are, to contribute something, to have something for posterity, where we will, like Dr. Jacob talk about some of the stuff that is, the minefield, that we can get it. Because, I don't think we understand the wealth we are or we have. Because we think that, with the narrow Eurocentric mind we've been conditioned, we just see things limited. I mean, there's so much, Maurice Bishop said something, and I like to use that all the time. He was quoted in a book written by an African-American who I met, writer Lloyd Jones, in a book of anthology of poems. He quoted Maurice as saying, "Reading and studying are conscious habits, constant habits of a conscious people."
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And we have to, and I've also tried to extend that to the concept of our land being the land of saints and scholars. We could be maybe not saints, but scholars.
Okay. Yes, but another point too. One of the best history books I've ever read was The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer, which was published in 1960. And Shirer spoke about how he came to write it. Now, he had lived and worked in Germany during the period of World War II. And they said it was the first time. Put it another way. When the Americans arrived in Germany as the conquering heroes, the Americans seized all of the German government papers that they could find and kept them from 1945 until 1955. And then William Shirer, who worked in Germany during that time until 1941, he heard that the government were going to give back to the German people their records. And they say anybody who is interested, they can come, and he did all the research which came out, the rise and fall of the Third Reich. It is by chance Maurice Patterson told me that the government of the United States had taken all of Grenada's PRG papers from 1979 to 1983 and had quietly returned them 10 years after. So I can't remember who allowed me to see them, but I was taken up on the fort and I opened this door.
They've been digitized now.
Right? Who digitized them?
I understand some of them are
All right, so, okay.
You ask about modern library.
Yes, please.
I happened to look at the document today, my copy of the document, a plan for a modern library/archives. And this was submitted in, I think, 2008 to the then administration. One of the things that was suggested is that we probably could have a national archives on its own, a national library on its own, or we could have a national library and archive system, whatever. But there were some suggestions were made. And since I have my copy, I know it was done and it was sent. But I don't know why it is that people feel when you support the technology, it must be drives and all these gadgets and no paper. And then when there is no electricity, or when the machine stops working, then everyone catch a fit, right? So I would go with Dr. Jacobs that we need to have our paper counterpart, but at the same time we need to embrace technology because it saves space and time.
Yes, and
of
course, convenience. Yes, of course.
Convenience and all of that. What I would like to see is that I remember looking back, the mission of the Grenada Library Services then was to have a literate reading public by 2010. We're in 2022. So we were some years behind, and even more behind because of the fact that we have some institutions that are not functioning right now. Yes, a modern library, but we need to get people back into reading. You know, a lot of people have gadgets that they just press this, press that, and they don't read it. They don't even read it. The thing says exit, and they don't even read that. Okay? We need to get people back into reading mode. I hear announcers, I hear politicians, I hear teachers, I hear people on the street say wrong things and use words wrongly. Sometimes they want to say something and say something else, and sometimes they think they say what they should say, and so then they just don't know, right? So, you know, for example, somebody introducing something and they say without much further ado. You know, and this kind of thing.
I've heard that recently.
And you know it's because people do not read enough. They don't read sufficiently, right? So we need to get our people back into reading mode.
Yes.
The modern library, yes. But before the modern library, we need to get people into reading mode. Now, as to what the modern library would look like. Libraries have always been challenged space. And I guess because books are bulky, shelves are bulky. Libraries have always been challenged budget-wise, because there has never been sufficient amount of money to go around. Because, for example, too, you may think it's more important to put a library, a school in a community than to put a library. Now, even if there is a school and a library in the community, and one demands some chairs, who are you giving the chairs? Of course, you will give the school the chairs, right? And the strange thing has happened. The library services are part of the Ministry of Education. And education never remembers the library, right? So, modern library, yes. But so many things would need to be changed or need to be put in place to facilitate this modern library. Otherwise, we will end up in the same problem that we've had for years.
Well, it's interesting because one of the institutions I visit whenever I go to another country, I don't know. The first thing I'm asking, where's the library? I want to see what's there. So all the Caribbean territories that I've visited, I've gone into every library. It's very interesting too, because I made comparisons. And I'm telling you the truth, we were way ahead. Grenada was way ahead in regards to particularly our West Indian collection. I can't think of another country, maybe barring, I'm not sure about Barbados and possibly Jamaica, but certainly not Trinidad, not Tobago, not Dominica, not St. Vincent and the Grenadines, not St. Lucia. None of these countries had such an outstanding or has such an outstanding West Indian collection as Grenada. I'm not sure if I should say had or have. Has. Okay, so let's use has. But we should really be proud of it, and that's it was said early on. We don't know that we're really sitting on some gold mines. And that's the thing. Let me quickly ask though. We talk about library services. We talk about going ahead and forging ahead with library services, and we're talking obviously about modernizing our library services. Where are the librarians?
That's one of the things I was thinking of was coming in.
Yes.
This was coming.
In the shoes.
Yeah.
No, it is a serious question that needs to be not asked a lot, but to be answered. Where are our librarians? I know there are a few librarians who, well, it was called assistant librarians at the time. It's what's now clerk.
We don't have, as far as I'm concerned, we probably have 2 or 3 well, we in the public service, as far as I'm concerned, we probably have 2 librarians.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about one. I'm thinking about one person who's in the public. I know there one individual who is in the private, but we do lack librarians in Grenada. Yeah. So if we're thinking about modernizing and getting things back together,
I'm coming to that.
You know, that's critical.
Now, our society, as all societies are, we are very political. Politics is the process by which social power is acquired, retained, and distributed in order to make authoritative decisions for the whole society. The question of politics is, or the problem of politics, is how to distribute scarce material resources. And let's go back to Grenada from about, let's say, Ivan. If you go and you look at Grenada's budgetary allocations, there's a consistent pattern. That pattern is 30% of our national budget goes towards servicing debt, right? And the rest is what claims the most resources after debt servicing is education. It shows that the governments of the day, let's say from 1979 until to the present time, are aware of the fundamental importance of education as a way to lift our society up from its the cycle of material and social poverty into which we had been thrown since, let's say, maybe 1834, maybe 1649 in our case. And we need to know how to best allocate these scarce material resources. Education, and was heartened to see in the last throne speech that education is given high priority. All right.
Okay. Well,
but we need part of this business about libraries and training has to be dealt with within that general rubric of education.
I know. Hold on. I know that everybody wants to say something, but we don't have much time, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have some closing comments. Don't forget, we still have we probably have part 2 of this. We'll be right back.
If there was ever a time to keep and stay healthy, it's now! We at Hills and Valley are here to help you take deliberate steps to maintain your health. We stayed true to maintaining the most comprehensive rates while stocking the widest range of medicines and health devices, including personal protective equipment. There are so many benefits shopping with us. You get great savings through discounts for senior citizens and reward cards for loyal customers. Ask about owning yours today. Visit us at Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George, Jubilee Street opposite the Grenville Bus Terminal, and at Hillsborough, Carriacou. Our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street also stocks the widest range of pharmaceuticals. We are with you on the hills and in the valleys. We are Hills and Valley Pharmacy.
I'm a winner, you are winner, we are winners, winners.
Be an instant winner today with the NLA by simply purchasing your Daily Pick 3 and Playway tickets at your nearest agent or NLA outlet. As a proud sponsor of the CPL cricket coverage, the NLA continues to support the development of sports, culture, and nation building in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. The NLA, making your dreams a reality.
I'm a winner, you are winner, we are winners, winners, winners.
That's our thing. Okay. So we're right back. I'm sorry, we had such an animated discussion here while we were off, talking very important things about library services in Grenada. It's a pity we don't have much time. But what I want to do, though, is to alert our listeners and viewers, of course, that we will have a sort of part 2 of this, even if we may not have necessarily the same panelists, but we will have a part 2 of it so that we can talk more about library services in Grenada. So we talked about the whole idea of modernizing library services and all of that. It's so very important for Grenada. And lastly, we talk about staffing and who do we have as assistant librarians in Grenada. So even if we do get library services really on foot, we therefore have to have some individuals who are trained to do that. Am I right?
It is a science.
On this note is where we're going to make our closing statements and contribution. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Antoine.
Yeah, it's a science. I was thinking about that. We don't encourage people to go into that field because that's not important. In fact, one of my biggest disappointments over the years is that the leaders of this country have not helped people to encourage people to lead, except maybe Maurice Bishop. When the leader who have led Grenada for the most part in the last many years, staying in the launch of James Mitchell's book, at the launch of James Mitchell's book, that he was not an avid reader, what do you expect? And Francis Bacon said that reading makes us a full man. And of course, we know that readers are leaders and leaders are readers. So you could check for yourself. But I mean, having said that,
30 seconds.
I think that we could do it, but we have to have the will. We cannot have an ignorant population and to interact with the rest of the world. We have to have a sophisticated populace where people can interact with the confidence. And you need knowledge. You need information. You need that at your disposal. I know you say last thing. When the city of New York people came down here with the smart St. George's the climate city, one of the things I was trying to get them to have on part of the thing is the restoration of the library, and they told me that if the authority wanted, they could have get a lot of assistance already to restore the library.
Yes, Dr. Jacob.
Yes, I would say that we should have a parallel tracks, training and development. One of the first things I would do is to move the library from where it is now. It is too near to the sea. We are subject with the politicians are very irresponsible about climate change, and they will only do something when the water reaches perhaps the top of where the library is now. The library needs to be moved from where it is and go. My personal view is the best place I could see is Old York House. Right?
Okay. So let me hear from you, Ms. Sylvester.
I will make my closing statements very personal in that you would have heard me being introduced as former director of libraries, meaning that I'm retired. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank all the people, the entities and the institutions that have been part of my career. I've been in library service since December 1978. So I've spent my entire life in library services. However, Dr. Jacobs talked about York House, and that is also in the plan. There was a plan. I was asked to do a plan, and I'm going to put her on the spot here. The minister was Minister Bonadine, and I was asked to do a plan in support of moving the library to York House, which I have done and submitted. So I am hoping that there'd be a modern library. First of all, I'm hoping that there'd be some consultation with the stakeholders, and there would be a modern library established. I'm hoping that the library would be built in a safer place, in a more convenient location. And I'm hoping that our Grenadian people rise to the challenge of becoming literate. I'm not going to say by the year when, but that we'll be a literate people and we'll be a force to reckon with. And my regards to the new director who is yet to be named.
Well, thank you so very much. And I want to thank all three of you for coming in this evening and talking. We had an abbreviated program this evening, and listeners, that's one of the reasons why we didn't open up the line. So when we come with our part 2 program, we'll obviously do that. So thanks a lot, gentlemen. And Lady Lillian. That's a nice ring to it, Lady Lillian. And thanks again, viewers, for being on the program with us, just looking in. And I'm sure that when we come with our part 2 program, you would have quite a bit to contribute to it. It was a pleasure having you on Beyond the Headlines. Until next time, I'm Stephenson Worme.